Hey y'all, Lauren Conlon, owner of Team Loco Fit, and this is part 2 of the video series on how to gain control of your focus and limit your distractions. So the first video, if you didn't listen, was kind of an overview of some of the science, just kind of with cell phone addiction and just lack of focus in general. Of course, I did not touch on all of it, but it's a really, really fascinating topic. So if you're interested in that one, you can go check out the first video. And now this one will be more of the practical application of, hey, I am somebody who's losing my focus or feeling like I'm losing my focus, and I'm just really, really chronically distracted. So the first thing that you can implement is more times of solitude. I think everybody understands what solitude is, but I think that this definition really, really makes it crystal clear. And the book that I mentioned in the first video, Digital Minimalism, again, highly recommend checking it out. He talks about that there is this lack of solitude in our life, which he calls solitude deprivation. So I'm going to read the actual the definition. Wow, okay, I always mess something up in a video, you know this. A state in which you spend close to zero time alone with your own thoughts and free from input from other minds. So again, most people think of solitude as like, oh, okay, I'll just spend some time alone. But how often do we spend time alone without the input of others? Meaning, podcast, audiobook, music, even classical music, there's still music in the background, going on a call. And I know for myself, I'm really guilty of this. Like anytime that I have free time, I'm just like, oh, I'll put on a podcast, I'll put on this, I'll set up a phone call, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it is important to have times that you do have some solitude. And when I talked about this last week on my Instagram, I made a whole post on it, and it was this really gorgeous picture in Seattle in a forest, right? So just for a little background, I did a webinar last year with my friend Cody in Seattle. And so I drove 45 minutes, I don't know what direction, some direction, to this waterfall. I hiked about 45 minutes up, up and back. So like an hour and a half, 2 hours, in this forest. I had no music, nothing. I literally just brought a notebook and was just enjoying the view. I took a few pictures, but that was barely it. I just wanted to really soak it in. And it was absolutely amazing. Now, can I do that every day? No, I live in Florida. So that's not possible. There's no mountains here. So if you live somewhere like that, that's great. But also where I was at, it's not really nobody was really living there either, right? So it's not like you just drive there every day most likely and just go on a 2-hour hike, unless you have zero life obligations. So for most people, they're going to have to do something that is easy for them to do, that you can just kind of go outside in your own house and do. So even if you go for a short 10-minute walk, and I'm going to talk about walks next, just going for a walk without any headphones and just kind of being with your thoughts. A lot of neighborhoods will have, a walking path, and then they'll have a seat, a little chair. You could just sit there, for a few minutes, just kind of enjoying it, closing your eyes or looking out. Or if you have a yard or a patio or a balcony, put a cushion down or a chair out there, just kind of sit for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. And I know for myself and probably for a lot of you guys, we think, oh, I gotta go to Seattle and hike up a waterfall, otherwise it doesn't count, right? No, you need to make sure, sure, if you can do that every once in a while, that's amazing. But if you can't, which most of us can't, you need to figure out ways that you can do this on a daily basis in a short amount of time. And that kind of leads into the going for walks thing. So one of the things that I love to do is go for a 10-minute post-walk meals. This helps with digestion as well as insulin and blood glucose control. So really good win kind of after a meal. But this also is a good way to kind of, get this solitude in, get some time to unplug, particularly if you can go for the walk outside. It's really, really helpful. So I find that to be incredibly useful. And now I will say that there are certain things that I like listening to when I'm walking. I feel like I just absorb it a little bit better. If it's more of an educational kind of thing that's hard for me to wrap my head around. If I'm just sitting, it can kind of be challenging. I either have to be sitting completely and just writing down notes, or I can find that if I go for the leisurely stroll, that can be helpful. So I'm not saying that all of your walks have to be completely in silence, alone in your thoughts, but it can be really useful to add that in, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day. Think about that, it's just the compounding effect of how that really adds up. And then the other cool thing about being outside and going for walks, in relation to cell phones and cell phone addiction and being on your device 24/7, I'm going to link up his Instagram below so you can check it out. He's an amazing neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman. So it's really, really awesome, what he's been posting about with all this, since the quarantine life and everything happening, people being on their phones a lot. And something that he talked about that I noticed myself was that I started feeling like my vision was not necessarily blurry, but it would go in and out. Like sometimes it'd be blurry, sometimes it wouldn't be, but it wouldn't necessarily be if something was close or far. It was kind of all the time. And he even said this thing which really made it awesome, like cleared it up for me. It was like, hey, sometimes things feel like they're in portrait mode, right? So like it's clear some places, but like really blurry others. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was gonna have to go to the eye doctor because I thought my vision was going. But I was like, this is really weird, because sometimes I would look at stuff and it'd be fine. Other times I'd be like, this is completely blurry. So what ends up happening is that our vision gets so distorted by looking, pretend this is a phone, it's not, like at a device that's so small and compact that we really have to like look out. And one of the things he talked about is like when you are outside, you should be looking like out. So now when I'm walking, and this sounds really silly, but a lot of times I would catch myself just like looking at the ground or like looking close. Now when I'm walking, I'm really making a point to look far, whether that's looking at a house or down the street or into a tree. I'm just really trying to push my vision out, and that has helped tremendously. Another good thing about going for walks is that it can help set your circadian rhythm, particularly if you go in the morning and at night. So I like to structure I try to do 2 10-minute walks a day. So morning walk after breakfast and then later walk after dinner. It's going to be different for everybody, of course, but if you can do something in the morning and at night with the sunlight off of your device, looking in the distance, you're going to help your eyesight as well. So tons of benefits of going outside and walking. I just listed there, so go do it. If you need more reason to go do that, I can't provide you any more evidence. There's so many reasons to go do that. And then some of the other stuff that is, kind of device specific versus lifestyle specific is turning off notifications. In the last video, I talked about this, and notifications and just having, checking that or just seeing those things pop up is so distracting. And remember, taking breaks is actually good cognitively. It can help restore your cognitive function, but the best breaks are when you determine when they are versus being interrupted. And a notification is 100% an interruption, not something that you are choosing to look at. So I've turned off all notifications. I did this years ago. I turned off all notifications on my phone. The only one that comes up is a text message, but I think I'm probably going to even take that off. And then because I have an iPhone and a Mac, I have my texts come to my computer, but honestly that is so distracting as well. And part of it is, hey, what if there's an emergency, or these are the reasons I'm saying I have it on there, or if one of my other coaches needs me, right, and they need an answer right away or whatever. But ultimately there's very few things in life that are really emergency driven, and if I still check my phone periodically, I think it'll be okay. So I'm probably going to make that step, even though it'll be a little bit more work. I think that I'm going to do that. So turn off your notifications if you haven't already done that. And the last thing too, which I'm going to start doing myself, is just kind of setting more times to be on the device, particularly social media. So this is a hard one because, so going back to that book, Digital Minimalism, Cal talks about doing like a 30-day, like, get off of your devices, get off of your apps, like all of this stuff, right? Ones that you don't have to use, right? But realistically, with the way that our business is set up, it is a big driver of business and content and education to continuously be on social media. And the way that social media is set up 100% is the more you use it, the more you reward it. And of course, everything in life is not about social media engagement, but it is very distinct when I notice that if I just post something, like say I check, my story, or mentions, right? Or I post stuff on my story. If I post a few in a row and then I don't post for like several hours and then I post again, there will be so many less views. Versus if you continuously, if I could make the same amount of, say I put 10 stories out, right? And I did 5 in the morning and then I waited all day and then I did 5 at night. That would be very different than if I did one every single hour. And I mean, again, they've manufactured these things to be that way. So I have to look out for my business, of course, and I can't just say like, oh, I'm going to just fall off social media, as much as I would love to do that. It's just not realistic. But I think I'm just going to have to get better at setting some more times for myself. Like, hey, not even thinking of it as a break, but thinking of it as like a time to check. So, I'm going to do this amount of work for X time, and then I check this. And you know, I talked about it in the last video, but there is something called attention residue, and this is what I noticed particularly with social media, is that, you know, you're on there, you're scrolling around, you're looking at stuff, you're liking people's things, you're commenting, you're coming back on your post, you're looking at stories, people are sending messages, it's all ping, 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 and then I'm trying to go enter a client update, and then I'm still thinking about that, and then I'm like, wait, but I gotta focus on here, and then it takes me twice as long to do an update than it should because my brain is still thinking over here. So I do see these detriments, and I'm sure you guys can totally relate as well. So it's just something that, you know, you have to get better at and just set parameters on, and everyone's business is gonna look different. If you don't necessarily have to be on social media, it might be a little bit different for you, and you could maybe take those luxuries of, hey, I'm only gonna post and look at my phone these hours a day. And you know, I'm probably gonna have to do something like that too, but just set them more frequently but shorter amounts of time. So just something I'm gonna play with, but I do feel like that is a huge distractor for me. So when I read the attention residue thing, I was like, yep, 100% this is what happens. So I really hope that the application here was helpful for you guys. Again, if you want to hear some of the overview of the science, you can go to the first video, check that out. As always, I greatly appreciate you guys listening. If you have any other questions, you can just drop them below in the comments, and if you have any questions about coaching, you can go to teamlocofit.com and fill out an application there.